Welcome everybody. Today we're going to discuss what we can expect out of 2024's RLCS. Thanks for coming around, guys. We're going to touch some touchy subjects today, some controversial issues, but also things that I think shouldn't be controversial, things that I think we all should agree on, and what we want in the new year of RLCS. It's been a long off season, and I want to make sure this intro is short so we can get right to it. So let's dive in. Thanks to everybody who's here live to discuss it as well. One caveat I want to add is that the order of these topics have no particular order. They simply follow the story and the thought process of these topics. Just because one topic is talked about before or after another topic doesn't mean it's more or less important than the other. Oh no, RLCS has been announced, especially the start of RLCS. We know we're beginning in about a month here, late January. Now, I'm not going to go full conspiracy theorist on what late January means, okay? You can divvy up the month between early to mid to late. Sure. Which I want to start with the big picture here. Why do I talk about the big picture? Okay, because I want to talk about optics, okay? From a 10,000 foot view, what are the details that people will see when the new season is announced? I believe one of those things is going to be the prize pool. Okay, let's dive into prize pool. Here is a graph. Look at this graph that I made of the prize pools for every season of RLCS. It began at $70,000 and it has increased dramatically since then. The most dramatic increase between season 9 and season X, from about $1 million to $4.5 million. Huge jump, huge. And it seems to have skyrocketed since then. But note something very in particular. Every single season, it has increased. Okay? Maybe it's a big margin. Maybe it's a small margin. But whether it increases or it stays the same, that has remained consistent from each season. Why do I note that? I note that because I don't really know if it's going to increase or stay the same for next season. Lately, Epic Games hasn't been treating Rocket League like its favorite child, Fortnite. And it feels like maybe Rocket League is a little bit on the back burner. If that means that for the first time the prize pool is decreased from 6 million, I think that's not so good for the future of the esport. And here's why. We already have orgs, such as Team Liquid, leaving the scene because there's not the best monetization path in the esport. Really, the only monetization path is if you win the league or come top 3, top 4 and get a big chunk of the change. So if winning the tournaments is a majority of how to become profitable and get revenue in RLCS, and that's the prize pool that's decreasing, it is going to weaken the argument for new esports organizations to join the esport and thus diminish the overall brand of RLCS. So I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit worried. If it decreases from 6 million and this trend, this line starts to go down, I may be a little bit scared. So that is the first change that I want to discuss. My expectation, my hope here for number one, the big picture, is that the prize pool either remains consistent or it increases, that it does not decrease. The fun part about this, by the way, guys, is when we make these expectations clear and the announcement is made for RLCS, we can come back and see whether we were right or wrong. Now, let's get to number two, and that is the overall format. So how in RLCS will these competitors actually be playing on the field? Let's start with league play. So league play, as you know, has not been around for RLCS for a while now. League play has been a part of RLCS for a long time, and they even had a second division in season 4 called the RLRS, which was a way to promote and demote teams between seasons. But all of that ended in season 9. The reason that some people really liked this format was because you knew what team was playing when. I mean, the schedule was laid out in front of you from the beginning. Now, why am I even mentioning this if league play has been gone for so long? Well, there's actually still people that want league play. Okay, some people like the simplistic format of league play, but I have appreciated that as RLCS has now become a global esport with many regions across the world, it also has this open qualifier system throughout the season. And to me, that's much better than coming back to that league play format. So let's move on to the Swiss format. Swiss, if you don't know what it is, if you win 3 games in the Swiss format, you advance to the next stage. If you lose 3 games, you are eliminated. It cuts the pool of competitors into half based on that format. The interesting part about it is while you're seeded against your first competitor, your next opponents are only decided by your results. So if you win, you play someone who also won their first game. If you lose, you play someone else who also lost their first game. Does that sound confusing? That's because it is. It creates absolute messes like you see right here. Take Team Axel as an example. This is one of the reasons I love Swiss format, and some would say it's the most entertaining, is because they lost their first 2 matches, but guess what? You can still go all the way. They went on to win each of their next matches in Game 5, resulting in this lovely moment. I had casted that run from Team Axel, and here's what the reaction from one of those final matches was from my co-caster, Seb.
They need to do it again, but check this out. I don't think any other team has earned this. We got the broom out here. We got a sup. Okay. We got our reverse sweeps in order. The brooms out of the closet.
Oh yeah, we're brooming.
Now. Nice. This has been a journey, and like you said, we're not done.
We're not done. They weren't done, indeed. They had this insane run of Axel to win those last 3 crazy matches in Game 5 to advance to the top 8 of that regional. It was an incredible story. And so if this made for one of the most incredible stories that I've ever been a part of in RLCS, why am I bashing it? Well, it's complicated. And I have AJ talking over here that I think people overblow the fact that it's overcomplicated. But imagine someone in your family asking, oh, hey, when are you playing? When can I see this team play? Oh, at this time on this stream. Oh, okay, how many matches are you playing? Could be 3, could be 5. Okay, well, who are you playing? I don't know who I'm playing. It's all decided on the format. And then everyone's confused. I don't really think that it's that helpful that you have no idea what teams are going to play who. Literally no idea. And that just scratches the surface of complications of Swiss. Do we want to talk about tiebreakers? Because we can get into tiebreakers if we really want to. Some tiebreakers are so complicated in Swiss and deciding who plays who that they're not even shared publicly. Okay, so Swiss, while it does create some of the best stories in esports, can be at fault for its complications. Guys, Swiss is complicated, but the other 2 formats are pretty straightforward. Groups has 4 groups of 4 teams each, with based on how you perform in that group, you'll advance to the top 8 or so. Double elimination is simple as well, in that the whole bracket is set as it's seeded, and you have a general idea of who you'll play next. One of the cons to double elimination is there's a bracket reset at the very end, which may extend Rocket League for way longer than it ever should. One of the cons to groups is some teams end up playing the same teams over and over and over again because the seeding doesn't change as much, and you're left with every single regional making up with the same groups, and the same matches and rematches happen way too often. So no group is necessarily perfect, but in my mind, I'd like for one to just be selected. I'd like us to just land on a format. I understand and appreciate that there can be different formats, and we've been trying different formats for every single split. And I also like the fact that Swiss decides the close qualifiers. when you have these open qual teams heading up against the locked in 9 to 16. I kind of like that Swiss format deciding the qualifiers, but for main event, for RLCS, let's just land on a format, perfect one, and move on. Personally, I'd like group, but I think having all these different formats for all these different splits complicates things a little too much. After we discussed format, we discussed how the fact that there are different ways to break down the teams from every single team in open qualifiers to the top 8. And the top 8 usually remain consistent. There's some that change from here and there, but there's always a sort of 9 to 16 or even a 9 through 24 that are left out of a good prize pool. And that is what we call the bubble. Where is the support for the bubble? This has been a massive concern for the late seasons of RLCS. There aren't really that many tournaments for the teams trying to compete for the top, but aren't necessarily the tippy top. By the way, I understand that I'm defining the bubble as teams 9 through 24. I understand that there are other arguments to say, no, actually, Pyro, it's 17 through 24, it's 17 through 32. I'm sure I'll hear arguments on that right now, but we can all agree that whatever the bubble is, it needs to be supported. Now, this was done later on in the season with tournaments like The Draw. Shout out The Draw, who pulled these teams in who couldn't get a prize pool going for the top 8 and competed instead in this tournament. It's something for, say, the tier 2 of Rocket League competitors that we just don't really see. So there has to be some support for these teams because guess what? Not every esports organization that joins Rocket League is going to get revenue through these competitions. There's gotta be some other way for them to compete and actually get a chance to win without having to go up against FaZe Clan, SSG, or NRG, or any of these top teams every single time and get knocked out. Otherwise, there is no incentive for these esports organizations to continue to compete. Sorry, but it's true. So shout out to JamesBot and Rizzo, who, in my opinion, did totally perfect the bubble tournament idea. I think that needs to be implemented in a structured way from the RLCS to support the bubble scene and the competitors that are extremely good at this game, but aren't the top 8. You know what else needs to be supported, guys? And this brings me to point number 4 of RLCS 2024. We need Psyonix backing on Women's Rocket League. I have no idea, genuinely no idea how we have gotten this far without a sponsored women's league in RLCS, but it is true. That still does not exist. And because of that, there is still absolute calamity in the women's scene. Maybe in post-production, I will share what is Women's Rocket League and why is it in shambles? Women's Carball, or WCB, is a competitive league that highlights the top talent of Women's Rocket League. Recently, an esports organization by the name of Kansas City Pioneers, or KCP, bought the program to broadcast monthly tournaments in both North America and Europe. Everything started out beautifully, excellent production, casters, and impressive competition. That is until everything suddenly stopped. No broadcasts, no tournaments. Not a peep. Turns out it was way worse than that. KCP actually owed people money from the producers, the casters, the players that won the tournaments themselves. While some say that KCP always had good intentions and they intend to pay everybody that's owed, others, such as myself, would ask how you can take on a program that's so precious and so impactful and not be prepared to fund it. It's crushing to see Valorant, a much younger esport, already hold international lands for its women's league, while Rocket League is mishandled by independent organizations and ignored by its developers. It's awful news, but it's important for you to know. This whole situation, by the way, happened again by a different organization from KCP to G1, and they just cannot find a good home to where that community can flourish and become a great representation of Rocket League competition. There is the foundation for Women's Rocket League, and it has to just be supported. There's not really much else to say about that. This next one is on region transfer rules and protecting regional integrity. It's not just about protecting regional integrity. It's also about accelerating the growth of talent in other regions. And I'm about to get into what exactly I mean by that. I would say there's a lot of opinions around this particular example and cross-region transfers in general. I mean, we even saw it in North America, where South American teams set up shop in North America, performed pretty well. We saw European players travel down over to North America, and something like Gen G, they were finalists in the first 6 events between North America and internationally. There's a pro and there's a con to adopting and embracing these regional transfers. The pro is accelerating the growth of talent in that region. And I want to take it from the perspective of the top team from SSA. We would hear from Snowy in interviews when they would go to the World Championships. They'd get weeks on weeks of scrims between the top teams. He would discuss how much his team and his individual talent would grow. Getting those constant scrims with better teams objectively improves a team. However, Snowy did then mention that going back to the region of SSA after the World Championship, there was no way to retain that talent. Without that constant competition with top teams, that increased competitive element of that team begins to dissolve. And so, if there are top teams from, say, more prominent and existing regions in RLCS that then move to some of these newer regions that aren't as developed in RLCS, it would absolutely help their talent, especially if there's more than just one and there's constant scrimming between those teams. I believe that to absolute certainty that those teams in that region would get better more quickly. However, there is the con, which I think is pretty difficult to tackle, but it's the fact that you don't really have people from that region representing that region. Imagine Stacks announcing and hailing from sub-Saharan Africa. The team representing this region is 2 Americans and a Canadian. Like, what? It just doesn't really sit right, if that makes sense. And maybe I'm alone in this, or maybe most people agree with me, but that's just my gut feeling. And so I feel like there's a balance. There's a balance somewhere in there to both accelerate the competition of a region while also maintaining the integrity of it. And I believe that it can include one or more of the following rules. Number 1 would be the players that compete in the region have lived in that region for X amount of time. Number 2 is that those players are citizens of a country within that region. And number 3, there is a 1/3 or 2/3 rule to the team where players follow the first 2 requirements, one or the first 2 of those requirements, but the third or the second and third don't have to. I'm not sure what combination makes sense. That's not really for me to decide, but I believe that having complete anarchy over who can join on what team in what region is a little bit insane and may end up in some very awkward and weird scenarios for RLCS. So for region transfer rules, it's not easy to come to an agreement. We just discussed a lot of options and considered the 1/3 rule as a pretty good agreement to say, hey, at least there is one player from that team that does represent that region and can have that kind of regional integrity that I've been discussing. And of course, there are teams like Complexity that are in North America that could have a grandfather clause where they continue to operate in that region, but the restriction applies to future teams that want to make a change like that. That final topic is majors. Let's talk about majors and what they could and, in my opinion, should look like. There's been some conversation around this about expanding the number of teams that attend majors. You have teams like from the Middle East and North Africa that are ripping other teams apart, but there's only 2 or 3 of them that get to join. You have teams like South American teams that are performing really, really well. I remember Team Secret in particular, who are making top 4 at majors, and they don't have as much representation like other regions do as well. And notably, you have regions like SSA who have 0 representation at the major. I think that needs to change. I think it all needs to change. There is so much competition beyond just North America and Europe that has to be included at this international level. And I don't see a ton of controversy here. I really don't, especially for SSA. I mean, I think that region has proved their worth at an international stage, especially when they're competing against regions such as APAC and even Oceania in some cases. So there's not much more of a case to be made here. What I will also include in this major conversation, though, is the fact that there's many days in the major that the competition occurs at the stadium, but attendance is not offered. Why are we not allowing people to buy tickets to watch these matches? So many teams come to the international setting, maybe just for the first and the only time that they'll ever compete, and they can't compete in front of a crowd. They can't compete in front of people that want to come and watch them. So RLCS give the ability for fans to watch these teams for as long as the major goes on, not just the last 2 days. So now that we've gone through every topic, I want to summarize kind of all my expectations that I'm hoping for this next season of RLCS, and those are the following right here. Equal or greater prize pool from 6 million of the last 2 seasons. Group format, group to single elimination for the top 8, I think fits great as a format to inherit for the RLCS. And I am happy to still do Swiss for the closed qualifiers or whatever qualifier system. I am not an advocate for league play or returning to anything like that. Bubble support is needed to be supported by Psyonix with monetary sponsorship for the teams from 9 to 24. They need a way to compete and get some revenue, and more importantly, get those reps in to keep the strength of those regions strong. The Women's League also needs Psyonix support. It has been victims of the controversy and the mismanagement of other organizations trying to operate the Women's League, and enough is enough. The foundation is there. The talent is there. Give the Women's League what they deserve. Cross-region restrictions should probably apply. Do we want a 3-person French team representing SSA at the majors if they get a spot? I don't know. Personally, I think that's weird. So write in some kind of clause, whether it's a 1/3 clause or whatever type of loose or tight restrictions that should exist. Just provide some proper justification, get some agreement from representatives from all those regions. And finally, discussing majors, I think we need more spots. Regions like MENA and SAM have proved their worth, that more spots may be needed from them, and SSA in particular needs to have that representation at the international major level. Listen, guys, there's still so much uncertainty about the new season. I'm really kind of spitballing here because I don't know what could possibly change. Heck, the new age requirement of 13 years old from 15 came out of the blue. So what could come in the new year? I have no idea. But no one's really talking about it either. So I thought I'd discuss it. So what do you agree with? What do you disagree? Please let me know in the comments. What things did I miss? We didn't do a single thought about collegiate. And for a lot of different reasons, I'm just not going to provide an opinion on that other than I really hope it's supported properly. But what else did I miss? What else do you want to add to the conversation? Let me know down below, and thanks so much for listening.